This is Canon's Eos RP. It's new entry-level mirrorless full-frame camera. It is the cheapest full-frame camera that Canon has ever launched, and in my opinion, I've been shooting with it for 2 weeks. It is probably the perfect mirrorless camera for Canon shooters to get into. Now, the biggest benefits of the Eos RP are its flip-out screen, its cost, very aggressively priced at €1,600, and the fact that it's full frame, which, although it doesn't guarantee you better photos, it does mean slightly better picture quality in low light, all other things being equal. Now, one of the other big advantages to this camera is its size, and this really is a huge advantage for somebody like me because I travel a lot and I need a camera that I can pack in a bag that doesn't weigh a ton. This is probably the lightest, certainly the lightest full-frame camera that Canon has ever produced. Now, if you want to know how much smaller this is the Canon EOS RP. This is the Canon 60 Mark I. The only reason I'm not showing you the 60 Mark II is because I'm filming on it right now with this video. However, the 60 Mark I is almost exactly the same size. Now, look at the difference in the size of these two cameras. The EOS RP, this one here, is considerably smaller and lighter than the very large 60 camera. Is it perfect? No. Most of the criticism being thrown at it at the moment is to do with video though. It doesn't shoot 4K except with a 1.7 crop. It doesn't shoot 1080p when you use an EFS lens and other things like that. It doesn't shoot 24 frames per second either in 1080p, which a lot of YouTubers and bloggers like. This is something they should really have expected. The EOS R, which cost almost €1,000 more, which was Canon's first mirrorless full-frame camera, shoots in 4K video with a 1.7 crop. This is exactly the same, but personally, that criticism is a little bit overdone for me because I think 95, maybe 99% of people who are interested in buying this camera are not going to use video, and if they do, there might be people like me who are perfectly happy to shoot in 1080p. What many people don't tell you if you're a newbie to photography with regard to 4K is that the files are absolutely huge, and also that the vast majority of people who are likely to look at your video will do so on a phone or a tablet or a laptop where you won't see that much of a benefit with 4K. All you'll see is the giant files hogging up your laptop or your tablet. Now, there are huge benefits to 4K. In particular, if you want to edit, you can crop in when you're editing. You do get a slightly clearer picture as well. But on a camera like this, at this price point, it doesn't feel like a valid criticism to me, or certainly not a reason to not buy this camera. Anyway, making up for the lack of 4K is this thing here, the flippy out flip screen, which I would take in a heartbeat above 4K. It's way more flexible. In fact, I don't know why all cameras don't come with this. I think it's a patent thing. I'm not sure if it's Canon has the patent or Panasonic has the patent. Anyway, there are very few cameras that come with a flip out screen. I'm filming right now on a Canon 60 Mark II, which also has a flip out screen, which is why I keep glancing to the side, because I can see myself in the video, which is something you can't do with 80% of cameras. So this is actually quite a good video camera. At the same time as launching the EOS RP, Canon also announced some new RF lenses. Now, this is a different mount from the 5D or 6D or any of the other DSLR cameras that Canon has had to date. It's called an RF mount, and Canon has produced a new range of lenses for that. Some of them are quite expensive. I have the 24-105 here with me. It has a little red band, which means you know it's one of Canon's professional lenses. I have to say the image quality from it is extremely sharp. It is a little bit heavy, but it's not quite as long as some of the other 24-105s that you will get. The reason, by the way, that Canon changed the mount is that it can actually bring the lens closer to the sensor. Now, this down the line is going to have some benefits. It means that Canon's next wide-angle lens, for example, instead of being a 16-35, it's going to be a 15-35. The only significant drawback that I find with this camera, having used it for a couple of weeks, is the fact that it is very difficult to do silent shooting with it. The problem with the silent shooting is that Canon has reserved it to one scene mode, which means you can't manually change your aperture or your shutter speed when you're shooting silently, which means you have to shoot in automatic mode, which means it is useless for things like churches where you have a mixture of bright and dark I think that is fixable in a firmware upgrade. I'm not sure that Canon will give us that firmware upgrade, but for me that is the one big disadvantage of this particular camera. Now, if you do want to use this with your existing Canon lenses, you will need an adapter. That comes in the box when you buy the camera. It's included in the €1,600 price. There are a couple of different adapters that you can buy. All of the lenses that I have tried the adapter with, almost all of the lenses have worked. There's one lens I have that doesn't work. It's a Tamron 150-600 millimeter. It's about 4 years old. It's the Mark 1 version. It really should work. It doesn't. It didn't work with the EOS or either. I would say that probably all of Canon's lenses do. Canon say they do, but just know that if you have some third-party lenses, there is a question mark over them. That Tamron 150-600 works absolutely fine with my Canon 60 Mark II, with my Canon 60 Mark I. It just doesn't work with the mirrorless full-frame cameras, even with the adapter. Now, if you want to know what goes to make up the Eos RP, basically they took the Canon 60 Mark II, took the guts of what makes up that camera and shoved it in this mirrorless camera here. That means largely the sensor, it means the engine behind it. This is actually a little bit slower, I have found, than the 60 Mark II. It also doesn't come with a top screen, which the 62 has, which I do find quite helpful. And the only other thing you would say is that if you are a professional and you're used to workflow with a lot of the buttons that Canon has, this doesn't have as many as the 60 Mark II. It certainly doesn't have as many as the 5D Mark III, 5D Mark IV. So this is aimed at a slightly different market. This is aimed at a hobbyist market or a traveler or somebody who is not really taking photos for a living. The other way you know it's not aimed at out-and-out pros is that it has only one card slot. And not only that, Canon doesn't put it in the side like it does in its 5D or 60 other 60 models. It puts it right here beside the battery. So it's quite an awkward get if you want to change in and out of batteries or memory cards an awful lot. The other thing is the battery itself is very small. So this is the same kind of battery that you'll find in the Canon 800D and a lot of those smaller cameras. You'll get about 2/3, maybe half of the shooting power or stamina that you would with some of the other 5D, 6D cameras. So that is something to bear in mind. If you're getting this camera, you're going to need a couple of batteries with it. The other thing worth noting, it's not a criticism, but it is worth observing, is that this camera is not as fast or complete as other prosumer cameras in its price range and its category. To give you a comparison, I shoot a lot with Fuji cameras as well, and the Fuji X-T3, which is around the same price as the Eos RP, is far, far quicker. It has a lot more features and functions. Whether you need them or not is another thing. It is not a full-frame camera like the Canon Eos RP is, so it doesn't perform quite as well in low light, but it is a lot quicker and a lot more responsive than the Eos RP is. Now that probably won't matter to a lot of people, but when you get used to that kind of speed, it can be a little bit frustrating when you want to whip the camera out and take a picture quickly. For example, I found the startup time in terms of the process with this camera was slower than it is on other cameras that I sometimes use. But that is a minor, it's not even a criticism, it's an observation, because at this price point, again, for a full frame camera, ultimately the resolution you get and the depth of field and all of that is absolutely superb with the Eos RP.